Shepard is one of the co-stars of Sealskin Rock. And don't mind, Sealskin Rock will be releasing wherever you find podcasts and on the Fool and Scholar Productions YouTube on March 25th. But in the meantime, you can also hear the entirety of their first story, Don't Mind Cruxmont, which follows a man searching for his brother in a small English village that harbors a dark secret that citizens will do anything to protect. So check out Don't Mind Cruxmont right now using the link so you're all caught up for which releases March 25th. And a huge thank you to Fool and Scholar for sponsoring this video. Driving in either direction along Interstate 81 near Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, millions of cars pass over a labyrinth of underground passages, likely without ever knowing it. Because unbeknownst to the cars above, near exit 10, sits the opening to Carnegie Cave, and for more than 80 years, adventurers have explored its 1,905 feet or 581 meters of dark lime tunnels. Located on private property, Carnegie Cave originally had 3 entrances, but construction of the Interstate 81 in the 1960s reduced that to just a single way in and a single way out. During that construction, the single remaining entryway was fitted with a corrugated metal pipe about 100 feet or 4 feet long and 3 feet or 1 meter in diameter. This pipe runs just underneath the highway embankment, and that means that visitors actually have to crawl through it to reach the cave, with traffic blazing by just 30 feet or 9 meters overhead. Once inside the cave and beyond the man-made entryway, it opens up into a concrete room that then passages ranging from feet or 1 to 3 meters high. Some of these paths lead to a 35-foot high chamber with a deep pool, but others narrow into tight, twisting corridors. But for the most part, its unique location and relatively novice-level challenges have combined to make it the most frequently visited cave in the area. Around 2 o'clock on July 9th, 1967, 3 teenagers, Jerry, Charles, and Nancy, parked their car and made their way to the entrance to Carnegie Cave. Since 16-year-old Jerry had been inside the cave before and had a budding interest in speleological research, he became the group's de facto leader, but he and the 2 others actually had very little experience in the type of environment they were about to explore. But either way, equipped with nothing more than a flashlight between the 3 of them, they arrived at the entryway and began crawling through the long drainage pipe. Now, it was customary at Carnegie Cave for tourists to leave a lit candle in the pipe to mark their way, and there were already 2 other candles burning there from a group that had previously explored the cave. So Jerry, Charles, and Nancy carefully crept past them and continued toward the interior to get their exploration underway. The 3 teenagers then crouched and crawled their way through the underground network of tunnels with Jerry's flashlight as the only source of light guiding them. The further they navigated into the cave, the more the outside world seemed to
Höhenvideos.
Interstate 81 traffic, giving way only to the sounds of their movements and the distant drip of water echoing through the tunnels. The sense of wonder that had guided their exploration so far, however, was about to change. Once they made it to the cave's furthest reaches, Jerry asked Charles what time it was. Charles then took a quick look at his watch and announced that it was 2:45, which meant it was time to start heading back out the way they came in. So back through the tunnels they went in the direction of the cave's only access point, but as they grew closer, they noticed something strange. At first, there was just a hint of sweet-smelling smoke intermixed with cave air, but that smell grew stronger and more pungent the closer they came to the final leg of their journey. Then, when they reached the pipe, the sight before them was unimaginable.
Und da, das Amulett! Wo sind wir? Wir reisen durch die Zeit und entdecken magische Orte. Und treffen fantastische Tiere. Ah, ein Wald!
Mach ich den Motorblock vorher oder nachher?
Standing in the way of the 3 teenagers in the outside world was a wall of flames. Fire and smoke roared through the confined space, and panic set in as the 3 teens realized the gravity of their situation. And horrifyingly, covering their faces with their sweatshirts in a desperate attempt to shield themselves from the smoke, they made an attempt to crawl through the inferno. Nancy led the way, followed by Charles and Jerry, but the intense heat forced them to retreat after crawling just 30 feet or 9 meters into the pipe. After resting for a moment, they tried again, and this time Charles went first, followed by Nancy and Jerry, with their hands and knees scraping against the heated metal as the smoke thickened around them. Once again, though, the conditions close to the fire were too bad, and they quickly retreated, coughing and gasping for air, as their sweatshirts did little to keep the smoke from their lungs. As Nancy and Jerry caught their breath in the concrete room at the end of the pipe, they realized that Charles wasn't with them. In the chaos, Charles had made the decision to push forward, ignoring the case of his friends to turn back. His cries then echoed briefly above the crashing fire before there was only silence, leaving Nancy and Jerry speechless inside the cave. And despite Jerry's frantic attempt to go after him, the smoke and flames forced him back, and the remaining two had no choice but to retreat deeper into the cave recesses, seeking refuge as far from the fire as possible. The temperature of the cave's interior was a cool 59 degrees Fahrenheit, or 15 Celsius, but this did little to comfort them as they waited in the dark, with their flashlight growing dimmer with each passing minute. Outside the cave, black smoke pouring from the pipe caught the attention of a nearby resident, Simon Aylmer, whose wife quickly called authorities while he ran to the scene. Minutes later, rescue teams battled the blaze until it was safe enough to begin searching the smoke-filled passages and knee-deep water for the missing teens. Meanwhile, huddled together on a rocky ledge about 1,800 feet from the cave entrance, Nancy and Jerry waited in hopes that help was on the way. At several points, they thought they could hear distant voices coming toward them, only to realize that their ears were playing tricks on them. After nearly 2 hours of shivering and hoping in almost complete darkness, the two teens finally heard rescuers calling out for them. They called back in reply, and soon the small chamber where they were waiting was illuminated by the flashlight beams of firefighters. And immediately upon seeing rescuers, their first question to them was, "Where's Charlie?" Emergency personnel quickly diverted their attention to escaping the cave. And finally, after almost a half hour traversing the cave tunnels, Nancy and Jerry were safely outside Carnegie Cave a little after 6 p.m. Thankfully, neither suffered any ill effects from the fire or their time of being rescued. Several hours earlier, around 3:30 that afternoon, Simon spotted Charles stumbling out of the cave entrance with his clothing on fire. While he rushed to help Charles, Simon's wife called emergency services. And when Simon reached Charles, he put the remaining flames on him out as Charles kept repeating that there were 2 more people trapped inside the cave. When rescuers arrived at the scene, Charles was loaded into an ambulance and rushed to the hospital. And although he had managed to crawl through the flames and emerge on the other side of the pipe, the ordeal had exacted a devastating toll. His body was covered in second and third degree burns across 59% of his skin. So, despite the efforts of medical staff, the 16-year-old succumbed to his injuries 3 days later. In the aftermath, firefighters were left to figure out how the fire at the Carnegie Cave entrance got started, and the source was immediately clear. The metal pipe that was installed in the entryway was coated all the way around in tar. And while firefighters couldn't say exactly how the fire got started, it was theorized that one of the two teams unknowingly knocked over one of the lit candles onto the tar lining when they went into the cave. You might expect a recent retiree to settle down after spending 30 years as a renowned reconstructive surgeon, but that idea just didn't appeal to Dr. Alfonso Morez. Alfonso spent 30 of those years in the United States and earned a reputation as a top surgeon in his industry, but when it came time to retire, he moved back to his home country of the Philippines in 2001 and opened a new clinic. The new clinic allowed him to work at his leisure, and much of his professional life from then on involved volunteer work. Admirably, he offered free surgery to those who could afford While this had always been a popular local swimming hole, it was what was discovered beneath the surface by Alfonso the Other Diver that draws divers from all over the world today. The Hanatuan Cave is entered by diving straight down from the topside pool. Then, once at the mouth of the cave, the entrance is so tight that only one diver can go through at a time. But on the other side of the claustrophobic entryway, divers enter a massive, expansive chamber known as the Mayor's Chamber. This room is said to be at least the size of 2 basketball courts. The chamber floor sits at a depth of 171 feet or 52 meters, and on the far side, from the group left the Anat 1 on June 17th to stage extra tanks inside and get together a general plan for the following day's dive. Alfonso, who was 68 years old at the time, was excited that day and proud that the cave he discovered was about to be featured on such a popular show. But maybe more than that, his excitement also stemmed from the opportunity to dive his favorite cave again. Since he discovered it in 2010, this would only be his 8th dive at Hinatuan. So the 3 divers with stage tanks in tow entered the cave, and all of them took note of just how strong the current was flowing that too much for the 68-year-old to fight against. As the 3 continued to struggle toward the way out, the 2 younger divers eventually made it to the exit and waited at the surface of the entry pool for Alfonso, but he never arrived. The details of what exactly happened to Alfonso are a closely guarded secret by the 2 divers that were with him that day, but they did alert authorities, who eventually arrived at the cave to begin searching for him. Considering that there were no known air pockets in the cave as time ticked by, the recovery and tragically, 8 hours after emergency services were called, Alfonso's body was found wedged in the tight entry tunnel at a depth of 131 feet or 40 meters. It seems he had run out of air in his fight to exit the cave.
Jetzt die richtigen Mitarbeitenden finden und 75 € Startguthaben sichern. Mit Indeed hast du es im Griff.
In Western Ireland lies the small town of Gore, which is surrounded by the picturesque Irish countryside dotted with farmland. Then, to the direct north of Gore is John Nolan's farm, and on his property is the entrance to a cave that was once used as the community's water well. Known as Pollinora Cave, it's one of several systems in what's known as the Gore Lowlands, which is an area prone to flooding. This is actually why it's been such a good water source for the town, even when drought is flagged everywhere else in the 38% of Ireland's total known caves. Suffice it to say, cave divers in the area have plenty of options to choose from, but Arthur just had an affinity for Pollinora and the other caves of the Gort lowlands. He was apparently such a fixture that the landowner John pretty much considered him part of the family. And despite his relocation, Arthur quickly became the most notable cave diver Pollinora produced. And once he got the necessary training and certification, he began to set records, discover long-held secrets of Ireland's caves, and be the first to accomplish what others wouldn't dare attempt. In fact, the personal motto he lived by was go where others turn back. In 2007, just months after he completed his training, he did just that by being the first diver to complete a traverse from a cave known as Hell's Kitchen to another named Robertson's Cave. Then a year later, he took on Ireland's deepest known cave and set a record there for the deepest cave dive at 338 feet or 103 meters. But it wasn't the records that kept him passionate about cave diving. Instead, Arthur lived for finding new passages, particularly connections between systems. In 2009 and 2010, Arthur discovered connections that doubled the total length of one cave to 9 kilometers and extended another one up to 11.5 kilometers. And he was particularly prolific in and around Gort, where he spent at least 200 hours in the area's underwater caves. To put this into perspective, according to Arthur's cave diving instructor, the types of challenges he'd take on were akin to climbing Mount Everest or being the first to reach the South Pole. And as with many people who engage in these types of activities, he had to up the ante. The one he was taking on at Pollinora Cave on September 5th, 2011 was so extensive that he'd been planning and looking forward to it for 3 years. During his journeys inside the cave thus far, Arthur had located a new shaft that he was able to explore, but it was a approached 9 p.m., 2 of the support team members quickly geared up and entered the water while another called for help. Within moments of the call, the Irish Cave Rescue Organization, or ICRO, started mobilizing and making their way to John's farm. Meanwhile, the 2 support divers were making their own way deeper into Pollinora Cave by following the guide rope Arthur had attached to the cave entry, but there was still no sign of him. The hope among ICRO initially and the support team was that Arthur had located one of the cave's air pockets, but no one could be sure unless they located him. A second attempt to follow the line to reach him was then made by ICRO divers, but once again they had to turn back. This meant that the rescue effort appeared that it was going to require a team of specialists, but the problem was they had to be flown in from other parts of the world, and the more time ticked by, the lower the chance of finding him alive. But unfortunately, without any other options, while waiting for these specialists to arrive, a third attempt to reach the end of the line was underway. This time, however, Arthur was successfully located. He was found more than half a mile or 850 meters from the cave entry at a depth of 171 feet or 52 meters below the surface. This was the furthest anyone had ever been inside Pollinora Cave. Almost 24 hours after he failed to return from his exploratory dive, his body made it to the surface. Unfortunately, it's not entirely clear what happened on his dive that day, and since he was alone, what truly happened that led to Arthur's demise is anyone's guess. a quiet determination that would shape his life and lead him down a path of faith and sacrifice. He was ordained as a priest in June 1935, and his ministry immediately took him to the capital of Warsaw, where the shadow of a coming war began to loom. After the invasion of Poland began in September of 1939 with a bombing campaign, Father Joseph rebuilt his church and provided solace and structure to the shaken faithful of his congregation. Through the chaos that surrounded him, though, Father Joseph was a symbol of calm and compassion, smuggling food past guards, arranging daring escapes, and gathering funds to bribe captors. His network of resistance offered a lifeline to those who had all but lost hope. And for his admirable work, Joseph became both a savior and a target, but he remained undeterred even as the war wore him down. After World War II ended, Father Joseph sought to recharge his weary batteries in the Tatra Mountains, which offered beauty, quiet, and seclusion far from the chaos of the previous 5 years. By July of 1945, he arrived in Zakopane, which is a picturesque town at the foothills of the mountains where his sister lived. And for weeks afterward, he spoke of exploring the trails that threaded through the valleys and cliffs, eager to sort of lose himself in their vastness amid the